Hello everybody, MeNoHaxor here, bringing you guys a very different video today because I'm actually going to make this video focused on talking about the support changes for Season 4 because there was an unofficial PBE patch note that came out yesterday and a lot of people have been asking me about what I think about these changes, and so instead of trying to reply to everybody and all that crap, I'm just gonna make one video just to kind of explain all my thoughts about all the different changes. There's a lot of changes regarding, the jungle and stuff like that as well. But I'm not going to talk about that since I am probably not the best person to ask about the jungle since I don't jungle very often. I mostly support anyways. So I'm just going to go over most of the changes that they did to a lot of the individual support champions. And I'm also going to try to cover some of the items and kind of give my insight into what I think about the changes. Because I know there's already a lot of discussion on Reddit and other places where some people are kind of just wasting their opinion about them. Most of them being like on the negative side, but I'll try to give my perspective on some of the changes I think that are both good and bad, and hopefully we can start some more discussion about that as well. Now that you have some of my insight and some of my points I want to bring up into the discussion. So just a lot of like random changes with like skins and all this stuff, which is pretty cool. But let's go ahead and start off. I'm just gonna go ahead and start off like with like stuff from the top and just scroll my way down and just kind of talk about all the random things are going to change. You can find a link to the PBE notes if you've never seen it yet in the description box somewhere. And so let's go ahead and take a look. So they added a mastery that grants experience every 5 seconds. That's pretty cool. I think the experience like mastery right now in season 3 is kind of not that great. I think what it's about 5% for 4 points in it, which isn't that particularly much, and it's really not worth investing considering you really can't waste all those points in utility fee for anything else anyways. But if there's like what just one mastery that grants experience, I think that's pretty cool. Or maybe if the experience ratio is a little bit better, because since before in this mastery tree it's like percent, and now this probably gives a flat amount, that's probably a little bit better. And the life insurance mastery that grants bonus gold when enemy lane minions die. That's cool. I know that's a concept that Riot has been talking about a lot in early season 3, where they're talking about, oh, we're trying to do some kind of thing where if your AD carry last hits instead of you, you'll get some kind of compensation money for that, which is definitely a good idea. That's definitely a good mastery to have. And increased assist rewards. Now this is very cool. So I know a lot of people, at least like a lot of the pros that did the beta testing for season 4 changes, always talked about like supports were getting an absurdly large amount of gold, and this is one of the main reasons why. It will definitely make a lot of supports like Sona and Soraka, who are very, very good at getting assists. Like Sona is so easy to get assists with if you just like mash your keyboard, hope your ally that you gave an aura boost to gets a kill, and you get a free assist for that. And so with the people with supports like that, like getting assists is going to be very easy. So your assist rewards are going to stack up very, very quickly. And I guess it'll also technically apply to jungle as well, since junglers usually don't take kills, which is pretty cool. So I think that's a great incentive to get supports a little bit more money, which is definitely something good and very positive. So Kage's like a pick now grants gold on dealing damage to an enemy. That's kind of like pickpocket, which I guess is fine. I mean, I don't see kind of a negative aspect to that. I definitely think you probably shouldn't get this item on like obviously like a melee support because you're not gonna really hit them. But maybe dealing damage to enemy, that might be a possibility. Like I know like if you're maybe like a Terra, you can just throw out like a stun and all in or something like that, or like if you're Luna, you can just like E in. So I guess technically like you can get it on melee supports, like it'll proc when you all in, but Kage's like a pick is definitely meant for more like the Sona, Zyra kind of type who poke a lot, and that'll definitely be really good. It'll definitely help them a lot, and hopefully it'll still give it's about the same amount of AP. I think there's some more stuff down there, but I'll talk about more about items later. Plus, for so non-transmute minions in the gold when they die, but you didn't kill them. Yeah, so once again, that's kind of like the whole life insurance mastery, which I guess is cool. This is definitely more for a passive lane, and Kagi's pick is definitely more for an aggressive lane. Reaper's emblem now shares the gold from your last hits with the nearest ally and heals them, which I think is pretty interesting. So I think this this item kind of incentivizes supports to occasionally take the last hit because the ally next to them, their ED carry, will get a little bit of benefit as well, which I think is definitely a good idea. Because getting a little bit of healing and you actually share the gold is definitely a great way for the support to get more money. So that's a great change. I think that's cool. 30-second cooldown seems pretty reasonable. So that's about you can do it about one time every wave, so you get about one creep. about 20 gold every wave, which is definitely pretty cool. I think that's good. And then Kage's pick Philosopher's Stone and Reaper's Emblem build from 365 gold starter. Now this is really big. So they're changing the starting amount to 365, which is pretty cool because now, depending on how much gold you get from the extra masteries, I'm sure they'll have some kind of wealth mastery in season 4 as well. 365 is kind of a cool number. Hopefully, it'll make it a cool number because at least the 525 right now, that means you have 160 leftover gold, which is, I guess, like roughly the amount of one, about like 2 wards, I guess, which is pretty cool. And because I believe they also changed the wards to 75 gold apiece, so you can get 2 wards and this, and any one of these items, which is definitely really cool for bot lane. I think that's a really nice change. And also, this price reduction is good so that when you upgrade these items into the later like core items like Shirelias and all that stuff, it'll be a lot cheaper. So that's always really good also. So mid game support items. Yeah, so these items turn into mid game. I'm not sure what does Reaper Emblem turn into? Martyr's Call, a high health item which allows you to sacrifice your health to shield allies and deal damage to opponents near the target. So that's a new item, which I think is kind of trying to add kind of like a locket, which I think is a cool idea. I think, oftentimes when you're a melee supports don't really tend to peel too often, but I think this item kind of works as kind of a free heal for your AD carry by giving him a shield, which is not a bad idea. I think it can be pretty cool. And Kage's pick becomes Shard of True Eyes, as we all know. It casts a Frost Nova on a ranged enemy. I'm not really sure what that does. Maybe it just slows them. And Philosopher's Stone becomes Shirelias, as we all know. And it grants 20% CDR. Now, this is a lot. 20% CDR is a lot of CDR. And I'm assuming this still builds off Philosopher's Stone, Kindle Gem in Australia. And God, I would love to get this item. Like getting 20% CDR is like super super good. So unless I see some kind of really good numbers on Martyr's Call or Shard of True Eyes, I would like almost always want to get Shirelia just because of that 20% CDR. But we'll see what happens as they adjust numbers and stuff like that. So now we go to champions. So this is probably the most interesting part because a lot of people have been talking about how some of the champions are not so good anymore. Some of them got absurdly strong, and so I'm gonna just throw out some random like comments about things that some people may not have thought about, and what might make you want to reconsider the strength and weaknesses of some of the champions. Let's start off with Soraka. So base stats, that's fine. It's all increased, and then new passive. Soraka's health and mana restoring abilities are 1% more effective for each 2% health or mana the target is missing. That basically means that if Soraka heals a target that's like really, really damaged and almost has no health, the heal and mana restoring abilities are going to do a lot more. So I get it kind of like if you want another way to think about it, it's kind of like applying a chalice effect on whoever you're targeting, because you know how chalice restores for mana depending on how much more mana you're missing. It's kind of like the same idea here. So that's kind of cool, I guess. It kind of sucks. It's not gonna get your passive is not gonna give out free MR anymore, which kind of sucks. But yeah, hopefully maybe I don't know how good this will be, but we'll see what happens like in after a little bit of testing and stuff like that. And Star Call. So Star Call now, what also like one of the big changes is that like since Riot is trying to make the utility of support scale with AP, which is kind of weird to me because I don't feel like supports will still end up building AP anyways, even with the extra amount of gold. But we'll see once again if the numbers change. So magic resistance reduced to a flat 6 and scales with 0.01 AP. So that basically means that if you want to get it to around 8 to 12, you're going to need from 200 to 600 AP on Soraka. And that's kind of unrealistic for a support Soraka because I would expect most supports to not have that much AP, maybe like 200 if you're really trying to build stuff like Death Cap and all that jazz. So that's definitely a lot. That's pretty hurt for the magic resistance reduction. Mana cost changed to increase early on, decrease later on, which I guess is fine. Star Call hits at least one enemy champion. Astral's Blessing cooldown is reduced by this percent. So that's kind of cool. So this kind of encourages Soraka to get a little bit more upfront and not just kind of stay in the very, very back and just heal everyone. So reducing it by 10% every single time you hit someone with Star Call is pretty cool. But I hopefully with by changing the EXP, Soraka will actually hit level 18 at this point and have a max Star Call. And so 10%, like that's 10% is the Astral Blessing has a fairly long cooldown anyways. So that's pretty respectable. That's about, 1 second off every single time you land a Q. And Q comes back up pretty often on Soraka, so that's pretty cool. I think that's a good change. Astral Blessing. So once again, they reduced the numbers but adjusted the AP ratio, so now the healing amount itself is a lot less. And the armor granted now scales to the AP. So I believe I'm not sure if this is on top of like the flat amount they have before, or is it now just from now on like 0.15. I assume it's stacked on top of a flat amount. So, 0.15 ratio, that's okay, I guess. Like if you have 100 AP, that's about an extra 15 armor. I guess that's okay. That's nothing. That's like pretty respectable, I guess. Armor duration reduced down, so that kind of sucks because now the armor boost is not going to last as long. But I think that's to compensate for the fact that Star Call will make your Astral Blessing come out a lot quicker. So I guess that's justified. Base armor change from 50 to 110. So this is cool. So originally it started off at 25, but now you're starting off at 50. That's an incredible amount early on. Like you will actually become untradeable for those 2 seconds you have the armor boost, which is pretty insane. And so her laning phase is gonna like spike up pretty well because of this like extra 25 armor, which is really nice. And lowered mana cost to 80 to 60, which is kind of good late game because once you have max Astral Blessing at level 9, like you run out of mana really, really fast. So I guess it's kind of nice that they reduced the mana cost. And infuse, uh, it now donates 5% of Soraka's max mana, which is pretty cool. So now you're gonna give quite a bit of mana to your allies now, which is really, really nice. So instead of 24, 68, 100, it's now or now it's 24 to 6800 instead of 40 to 200. So that basically means that early on, 5% of Soraka's max mana to equal 20, that needs to be. Oh god, I cannot do math right now. 20 divided by 0.05. That's about. Soraka needs about 400 mana, I think. And I think Soraka can get 400 mana pretty early on. So, like, it really didn't affect Soraka, a whole. It wasn't really that much of a nerf. I mean, if Soraka just gets, like, a Tear of the Goddess or something like that, like, she's gonna have so much mana, which is gonna be pretty nice. And this is this is kind of, I guess, quality of life changes. I guess is fun. Like I hate casting out on like an ally doesn't have any mana, so I guess that's nice you fix that. And that whole enemy casting it to the enemy, it doesn't really matter too much because you really don't use your E as a damage source anyways. You kind of use your E more as like just for the silence. So I don't really care that much about the whole damage change because it used to do an okay amount of damage. I don't really care about the damage that much right now either. So not too big of a deal. Healing changed to 150 to 350 from 200 to 300 to 440 plus 0.55 ratio. So now they nerfed the wish ratio, AP ratio. So wish is going to be healing for a lot less, assuming you're going to build more AP. Now, here's like the big problem I have with this. The problem is that this is all assuming that the support is going to be building AP, which is not always going to be the case every single game. Because I know like supports have a lot more gold, but I think the biggest problem is that, you know, I feel like there's still so many good aura items and so many other items that don't give out AP that supports could definitely be building. And, I'm not sure if assuming that all supports will be building AP is a good decision by Riot, but once again, we'll see what happens if they adjust the numbers or anything like that. I really have to kind of test this out myself to see how fast supports actually do get the gold anyways to kind of really justify it. So Soraka, overall, I think it's definitely really good changes to overall just to kind of get her to be a little bit more active in lane and to get her to not be so one-dimensional and super boring. I think that's a good change because I know Vrida's always talked about how Soraka was really really boring, but it's making her a little more interesting, which is nice. So I appreciate that. So let's talk about Taric now, right? So Taric got a lot of interesting changes. Most notably is on his passive. So Gemcraft gives Taric a buff that deals 40% of his armor as bonus magic damage on a next auto attack. So essentially that's a free Sheen proc, and based on how much armor he has, and also reduces the cooldowns of all his abilities by 2. So I guess that's kind of a good way to encourage Taric to like punch people more because they tried to do that with the whole max mana thing and it didn't really work out too well. So I wouldn't. So that's definitely a pretty good change to the passive, and especially the reducing the cooldowns of all abilities by 2 seconds. That's pretty important, and I'll like talk about that in a little bit. So Q Imbue, which is his heal, is cooldown reduction on auto attacks and removed, which is reasonable since it's on his passive. Beast cooldown lowered by 2 seconds, because you can see the difference there, which is pretty good. AP ratio lowered, that's reasonable since you're assuming that they're going to build AP. And adding scaling for 5% of bonus health, which I guess this is an okay way to make up for the AP ratio since you're really not going to build that much AP on Tarek anyways. So that's, I think, a pretty fair balance to the Q. I wouldn't say there's anything that outrageous about that. And so W, Shatter. So base damage got lowered, but the armor ratio on the Shatter, when you apply the, this is for when you're applying the damage, by the way, not when you're like walking around, you're giving the passive warriors to your team. So the armor ratio, like the bonus armor from your Shatter increased to 50%, which I guess is okay. Like it'll definitely do a bit more damage than before. AP ratio lowered to 0. So now your W isn't even going to scale on AP. So why would you even get AP in the first place on Tarek, you know? Because like now you're not really even going to be bursting for that much, so there really isn't that. This basically like gets rid of all incentive to get AP on Terry. Since the W actually did a pretty respectable amount. Like if you like, because if you like ult, you press W, and then that does a pretty good amount. But now that AP ratio's gone, that's pretty sad. So Dazzle, the cooldown would increase to 18 to 14 from 14 to 10. AP ratio lowered once again. So that's okay. Like the cooldown increased because of the passive, which is pretty reasonable, and then your ult is the AP ratio got lowered and cooldown increased as well. So here's the biggest problem I have with Taric. So let's say you get 40% CDR on Taric, which I think is very reasonable considering now you can get Shurelias for pretty cheap and it gives you 20%. You can get Runes of Masteries, you can buy, like Boots of Lucidity, let's say, right? So just say you have 40% CDR on Taric. So at max level on your E, which is 14 seconds. Your Q is going to be about 14 seconds, and I believe if they didn't change it, the Shatter should be on 10 seconds, right? So here's a problem I have. So if you have 40% CDR, 40% of 14 should be 5.6. So that means your cooldown on your E and your Q is going to be at 8.6 seconds. Okay. So let's say you stun your target, you auto attack them. That's minus 2 seconds. So right after you use your E and it's on cooldown, it'll now get reduced to about 6 seconds. It's about 6.4. I'm going to round down to 6, right? And then you press R, you would auto attack again. That's 4 seconds. You W, you auto attack. That's 2 seconds. And then you Q something, and you auto attack. And oh wait, your cooldown on your E's immediately back up again, and you can throw another E. So basically, within the span of your combo of just E, R, W, Q, you can just throw out another stun again, which I think is kind of stupid. Like, you can basically stun somebody for 3.2 seconds. Like, because I'm sure you can do your rotation on all these spells within 1.6 seconds. Like, if you have fast fingers, you can definitely do it within the time span. And if you do that, your E's gonna come back up again, and then after you do that, your W will probably come back up again pretty soon, and so will your Q. And so if you keep on doing this rotation like of EWQ over and over again at max CDR, you're essentially like this in total reduced all your cooldowns by 6 seconds, right? Because it's 2 seconds per spell. So your E is gonna come back up every like freaking like 2 seconds. That's so stupid. Like you can keep casting a stun every 2 seconds. Like how ridiculous does that sound? Assuming you have the mana for it, that's so stupid. Like I would not want to fight against a Taric that has a stun up every 2 seconds. Like I don't know anyone that wants to do that. So that's a really big problem, I think, by just by just having such a strong passive like that. And I probably have, of course, I have to probably test this myself, but this is just all theoretical. If you can get your stun up every 2 seconds, that's really insane. And I'm not sure if this is balanced at all, but obviously you guys we can talk about like I think people should talk about this a little bit more because I think that's definitely probably the most concerning issue about Tarek. So Leona, just a very small change. Just reduced the armor MR on her W and added a scaling AP ratio, which I guess is fine. Leona doesn't really need to build AP anyways, and you only need about okay, so you have 5. It's a -5, so that should be about 50 AP. So you need about No, sorry, that's 25 AP. I'm dumb. So it's about 25 AP to get back the MR, the armor and MR that you lost from the nerf. And so 50 AP is pretty easy to get, especially if if you already have some items that already give you the AP, like if you have like I don't know, like the Kages or something like that, then you're gonna get a little bit more armor MR than before, which is pretty nice. I mean, Leona's AP ratio is already like decent. They're not super substantially strong, but they're definitely doable, and you can definitely build some AP on her and still be pretty tanky, which I think is a pretty good change. I actually like this change a lot, so that's cool. So Janna, okay, this is probably the most controversial change they have. So passive is now not global anymore. It's now within sight range around Janna and increases the movement speed to 5% instead of 3%. Now, this is actually like a really, really big change to the passive. This is probably the most impactful change that they're going to have, and they're for sure going to keep this and probably tweak the numbers a little bit. The reason why is because giving your team global movement speed is really, really, really strong. And so like especially in other lanes like mid lane and top lane or even the jungle like the jungle will clear faster than the other jungler. Like the top laner can walk a little bit faster and therefore can like run away from the other top laner if he doesn't have boots, and same thing for the mid laner. And so like the passive was just super super strong. And so now that they're removing the global and really only making the movement speed available to the AD carry is I guess an okay change, but I'm concerned about some AD carries like Caitlyn, who really relies on being able to move around and kite in the laning phase and just kind of poke him down. Like having that 5% movement speed increase is pretty big, and so I have to, of course, have to see how it actually turns out. But that's definitely a really big change to mostly the other lanes. That's not bot lane, but that's really important to note. So the Q, the AP ratio got nerfed pretty hard and lowered the charge damage, and it added a zero point 0.1 AP per second that Howling Gale is charged before release. So I believe what that means is that if you charge up your your tornado for 4 seconds, you'll end up with the same amount of ability power ratio as before, since 4 seconds means it's an extra zero point 0.4 AP ratio. So added to this will give you 0.75 again. So that basically you just want to make sure that you know because before with the AP Johnny you can just throw out a quick Q and it'll do like 500 damage, but now you actually have to charge it up a little bit first before you can send it out to actually deal damage, which is a pretty like that's a no, that's a reasonable change, I guess. Like it didn't really affect her not too much. And then W on the Zephyr, it now has an AP ratio for the slows and the self movement speed. So zero point 0.4 for the self haste and zero point 0.12 for the slow, which I think if you have about like 600 AP on Janna, that's a lot. That's a lot of slow. That's about 72% slow. So that's a pretty big amount. And then the zero point zero 0.04 with about 600 AP is about 24%, which is pretty strong as well. So that's kind of concerning. But this is only when you have a lot of AP. So early on, it's not going to be as effective. So you definitely have to start building some AP on Janna. Lowered the damage ratio, which is pretty reasonable. Lowered the base slow to that, which I think is also reasonable as well. Now the E. So added an AP ratio to the AD given to her allies. The ratio is 0.33 AP for the base AD. So once again, if you have about a 600 AP Jaina, which is reasonable if you build strictly AP, then that's like 280 on a shield, which is a lot. That's like crazy. That's like how much like ADs tend to have towards mid game, and so just giving them like doubling their AD ratio is crazy. That's like if you have Graves, and Graves are ult. The Graves ult already does like maybe like 40% of most people's HP, and then oh wait, now it does 80% of someone's HP, which is so stupid. I think they have to turn that down. That's absolutely insane. 0.33 AP for 180 is way too much. They have to turn that down for sure. Like that's so crazy. If anything, I would imagine it'd be zero point zero 0.03 and only giving maybe like 20 extra. I think that's so much more reasonable and so much more realistic. Like of course on top of the base 80 amount. So that would be a lot more reasonable than 0.33. That's a typo or something. My God. But yeah, but basically my perspective on Janna is that if you start building AP on her, she'll be really, really effective, and that's what you should probably start doing instead of the Aura. Since like the AD scaling on the shield is just so good to pass up on. Like I just think it's so cool. And plus you also need to build the extra AP to make sure you run a lot faster, which is one of Janna's strengths before. So I would definitely start building AP on Janna. Now Nami is now scaling at higher movement speed with more ability power, and so once again they're trying to change a lot of her utility to scale with AP. So add a zero point 0.1 AP to 1% movement speed ratio to the movement speed buff. So before her movement speed buff, if you look in the wiki, it gained 40 movement speed for 1.5 seconds, like a 40 flat amount of movement speed. And so now they're doing it by percent. So it's definitely a little bit different, but in the end, I think it should be a lot better for Nami if you build AP on her, since about 40 to 45 movement speed, I would say is about. Oh God, I need to like. There's a lot of math involved, but if you want to, I would say like roughly, eh, if you have like about like 100, 200 AP, like that's about what 20 movement speed increase on all her spells. That's a pretty fair amount. That's like really respectable. And if you have 400 AP and you get 40% movement speed, that's the same amount as a Shirelli, to put that into perspective. So casting like a Shirelli on everybody every single time you cast a spell on someone is that's kind of too good to pass up on that. That's really, really strong. But, we'll see what happens. And Q, Aqua Prison, AP reduced, of course. Ebb and flow. Now this is interesting. So they removed the percent drop off the bounces, because before with ebb and flow, every time you cast a spell on any, if you use a spell at all, the every time it bounces, it will reduce the amount it damage it deals, or the damage, or the amount it heals by like I think 50%, I think. And so now there's no drop anymore. So whatever flat amount you have, like if your ebb and flow will do like 220, it will always heal for 220 and then deal 220 damage. And so like at 200 AP, of course, and can go over zero, leading to increased effects off every bounce, which I think is pretty interesting because now if you have more than 200 AP, like if you go about all out AP on Nami, so let's say you have 600 AP, then like I would assume that's about 30% since 15% is related to 200. And so increased 30% healing on a spell that already scales off of, God, how much does it scale off of? The heal scales off about 30%. So 30% of 60 is about 180. So an extra like, like an extra like two, it'll heal for about 250-ish extra, which is pretty nice. So I would say that's okay. Like that's not a too big of a change, but it's nice, I suppose. Then E increase the slow amount by a 0.05 AP ratio. Okay, this is a really big change here, cause before, um, like actually, is this on top of a flat amount? Increase the slow amount. Yeah, I think this is on top of a flat amount actually, so I suppose that's okay. Because I was gonna say that if it wasn't on top of a flat amount, that would suck ass. But I think it should be on top of a flat amount, so I guess it's okay. 100 AP for 5% additional slow is pretty reasonable since the slow on Tidecolor's Blessing is already really strong anyways. It was probably like one of Nami's like strongest moves to help people kite. So increasing the slow even further is gonna be pretty cool. And then Tidal Wave reduced AP ratio, which is the course I've given. So I think Nami's AP ratio is definitely not as drastic as like Janna's, but I think it's definitely not too bad of an idea to build AP. I'm not sure if it would still be that worth it. I have to test it out myself, but I would say that these AP ratios are pretty cool. And then with Sona, these are just like I don't. These are just mostly like all AP ratio gets reduced. Power Chord damage got dumbed down, but it now has the AP scaling ratio, which is cool. So if you build like a fair amount of AP, it'll help out a lot. It'll help like mitigate the nerfs that they did, and instead increase your Power Chord damage, which is nice. So Hymn of Valor AP got reduced, base healing amount got reduced. Saga Celerity now like scales off AP to provide more speed auras. 0.02 is not very much at all. Like you need like once again like 500 AP is like 10% movement speed. which I guess is not that much compared to like the level on like Nami's Surging Tides, but that's probably because you're basically activating like almost as much as Aurelia's like every single time you press E. So that's pretty strong actually. And then the crescendo got reduced. That's actually a really hurtful ratio change from that's like half the amount. So basically like I don't even know if I want to build AP on Sona anymore. I would probably not because even right now AP Sona is not that strong. I mean, it's acceptable, but it was never like that big of a problem to begin with. And now by like reducing the ratios even more, Sona's just I would never even build AP on Sona. Why would I? I would rather just build more auras anyways. Like, I'd rather just get like, like a crucible, maybe some of the new items and stuff like that. Like, why would I ever build AP on Sona anymore? Like, the ratios are so bad. Like, the damage is so low, it's ridiculous. So it's just not worth it. I would not build AP. And then we have Lulu. So Lulu, the base damage of Pix got reduced, but it has 0.15 AP scaling, which is reasonable. Like, if you have about 500, 600 AP, that's a pretty darn good amount. Like 600 AP is about, oh man, that's that's about 90 extra damage on every single attack by Pix, which I think is fair, not as drastic as like some other people's, but unless it's like 90 extra like little tick. So it's because I'm pretty sure like Pix's like attack works on like separate ticks, like 3 ticks of damage, and so maybe that's a lot. I don't know. I have to test this out myself. Q Glitterland now, at the minimum speed on slow fallout, which scales off AP once again. And then W, they took out the AP boost on W, which kind of sucks a lot. This kind of sucks because whenever you cast like W on like yourself, and then you cast a spell, it'll do more damage because of the AP boost. And it also made laning party with Lulu very specific because one of the like you would always want to put Lulu with an AD that would scale off some kind of like AP. Like Corki was always a really good partner because Corki deals plenty of magic damage, plenty of spells to scale off AP. So getting the W Whimsy boost is really cool on him. But now that they removed the AP boost and basically only have W for the increased, like for the movement speed, that's it definitely makes your decision making on W a lot more. Like you have to definitely take into consideration a lot more when to use W on your ally now that you don't really have an AP boost anymore. Like I guess you just use it to run away and stuff like that, but it's kind of dumb. I mean, I guess like but the AP ratio is pretty nice. Like 1% per 10 AP. That's a pretty substantial amount, especially if you have a lot of AP, like 500 AP. That's a pretty good amount actually. And then E help picks, increase the AP ratio for the shield, and reduce the AP ratio for the damage. And AP ratio for the shield, that's a pretty damn big shield if you have like 600 AP. That's like 420 HP shield. The AP ratio for the damage, that's a little bit lower, but it's okay. Not too big of a deal. But once again, since they're buffing the passive picks damage anyways, like getting AP is definitely pretty cool. And then Wild Growth is going to reduce the base damage. Well, that's only because of the I believe what is that? 50% AP scaling on Lulu's Wild Growth. So since you're going to be they're assuming you're going to be building AP anyways, which is why they reduced the base damage, which I think is fine. I think you should definitely build AP on Lulu now because just kind of like the same case as Jono, where she's going to have so much more damage if you put your E on someone. If Lulu puts her picks on somebody, that's going to be doing a crap ton of damage. So I would definitely start building AP on Lulu. I think this is definitely a great way to bring Lulu back into the meta since she kind of fell off a little bit. So that's a good move. I think this is a good change actually. So overall, even though you kind of lose the AP boost, but it's okay. So Philosopher's Stone is now Philosopher's Pebble, and it grants 2 gold each time a nearby minion dies, which is fine. And what's interesting is that you're only limited to 1 gold income item, which I think is really God, I want to say that's bad, but I like need to kind of see how each of the items do. Because where are those items? Uh, right here. Because between Kage's Pick, Philosopher's Stone, and Reaper's Emblem, you can only choose one of them. And so, like, these items basically mean that you have to choose between whether or not you want to play, like, a poke lane with Kage's, like a passive lane with Philosophers, or a Reaper's Emblem, and go, like, I guess that's kind of like in the middle. I guess you would probably build this for more like aggressive, like all ins because it can build towards like the Martyr's Call, which is a high health item. So I would assume you'd get this if you're gonna be tanking a little bit as well. So basically it's kind of dividing up the support into roles. So you basically like before you even start the lane, you have to plan out exactly how you want to carry out the lane in you want to be poking, you want to be passive, you want to be aggressive, and it kind of goes back to the whole cycle of supports, because people always say there's always like some like hidden rule or something like that sustain will beat the poke lanes will beat the all-in lanes will beat the sustain lane, which I don't really believe in that cycle, but that's what most people. That's like in general, that's kind of true to some extent, and so by limiting only like support to one of these items, I also think that's a good move to kind of force the supports to buy other items because supports were so confined to like buying double gold for 10 and like sightstone wards like oracle and stuff like that. By forcing them to only choose one of the gold generating items, you're kind of telling supports, okay, now you could go ahead, maybe you'll build something like an Ohm Wrecker, build something like like a Rabadon's Death Cap or something like that. And so I think that's actually a really good way to get supports to force them to buy other things when getting the other gold percent items would probably be the most effective method of generating gold. So I think that's very very big that they did that, and I think that's a good decision on their part. And then now we have trinkets, which is definitely the most talked about thing so far. So with trinkets, you have three different like options to use your trinket with, and it takes up a seventh item slot, so it's okay. You can still buy your 6 items. And so you have a warding totem, which places a stealth ward for 60 seconds. Stealth ward is the new name for the green ward, and so like it's on a 120-second cooldown, lasts for 60 seconds. It's really good temporary vision because it's invisible. Like they changed a lot of the wards to make it so that stealth wards are the only wards that can be invisible, and the vision wards are now always visible, but they give true sight. So it's definitely, pretty useful early on, maybe. Like, if you have some kind of hunch that the jungler might be coming, like if you're top lane and it's like 3 minutes, oh, I should place down the warding totem and use one of my stealth wards, which I think is a good idea. It also might be good for bot lane. Let's say you want like temporary vision of one of the brushes since your lane is pushing, right? And so you can place one of the warding totems in there, and that'll be good to just get basically an explorer's ward amount of vision, which is pretty reasonable for about 2 waves, so that's cool. Scrying Orb reveals the location within 1,100 range for 1 second, which is essentially clairvoyance. Now, this isn't like it's only 1 second, which is kind of crappy. Like for a 150-second cooldown to get vision of a really far away area for 1 second, you basically only use that to check for objectives basically, and you're like super. And this is like worst case scenario when you're like super super desperate for the vision. Like if like I don't know if they're doing Baron or not, if I don't know if they're doing Dragon or not, like I need that vision, I will use the Scrying Orb. I think it might be good for possibly junglers to use it, since like at when the creep spawn and the jungle things are about to spawn, you can use your Scrying Orb really quick, right? And you can see where the jungler is starting because you can just use it on like the red buff or the blue buff or whatever. And if you see where the jungler is starting, that could be really good information because that's enough information you can get for 1 second. So that's definitely um it shouldn't be used very often by supports. I would almost never recommend you use the Scrying Orb part of the trinket, but I think it's good that they include that. And then Sweeping Lens disables and reveals any nearby hidden wards, traps, or devices for 4 seconds. So what's interesting is that it disables and reveals. So by disabling, like I'm mostly looking at like Teemo shrooms, because those things. Okay, if you ever have an oracles and you're trying to clear Teemo shrooms inside bushes and stuff, it is probably the most frustrating thing in the world. You have no idea, and so this is really nice because you just pop it, and then oh look, all the mushrooms around me they glow up in the brushes, and I can just go auto attack them to death, which is really really nice. So it's also good because this functions as basically your way to counter the enemy wards since you can reveal any nearby hidden wards since now only the south wards are invisible. So if you see your enemy place down some kind of sight ward anywhere on the map, you 100% know where it is because you like keep track of their items or whatnot. Then you can use Sweeping Lens and then clear it out, which is really really cool. Unfortunately, it's on a 180-second cooldown, which is a lot. So I would say that I guess this is probably like the trinket you should probably prioritize, at least in the laning phase, especially if you want some brush control. But otherwise, if you don't need brush control, you can just stick with the warding totem. But I would definitely prioritize using Sweepy Lens if I was someone like Leona or Blitzcrank, who is really, really like heavy on maintaining brush control, which is a pretty good like thing to do. And then once you hit level 9, the upgrade, which is nice. So now the upgrades, now the ward lasts for 120 seconds on 120 cooldown. So every time Trinket's done, you can place another ward, which is nice. Cast from increase 2000, that doesn't really matter at all. And then the area effect increased by 100%, cooldown reduced to 150, which is nice. So now that the cooldown's reduced to 150, that's pretty cool since now when you're about level 9, the bot tower should be killed and you should start roaming a little bit. So by sweeping the entire area like around you like by a large amount, that should be pretty helpful, I think, just to know where the enemy wards are. Even if you can't kill all the wards in time, just knowing where the wards are is really, really helpful because now you can like start avoiding them and stuff like that. I wonder actually if the enemy knows you used the greater lens. I actually don't know, but they don't really put that much information on it. But if you can see if the enemy team is using it, that'll be pretty cool. But that would be helpful, I mean. But if they don't, that's awesome. Like I think there'll be a lot of like really cool like sneaky plays you can do. A lot of mind games going on. And then you can upgrade these to greater stealth totem, greater vision totem, and farsight orb, and you get oracle's lens. This is a new one. So now you grant true sight for 10 seconds after activation. So this is basically the new oracle since I believe they took out Oracle's Elixir now. So now that you can't have True Sight running around you all the time, if you're trying to chase someone down, like a Vayne or a Twitch or an Evelyn or something like that, then now having like this option to use Oracle Lens is pretty helpful since it's probably not that feasible to like keep placing to place down a vision ward since you only get one vision ward now. Like I'll talk it says down here, but you only get one vision ward now. And so if you really want to keep track of somebody that can go invisible, that this is like your option. And so this is a really good idea to have the upgrade for the trinket be like a very small temporary oracles, which is really, really good. And plus, like, it doesn't. You don't necessarily always have to use the Farsight Orb now as well. Like, the cast range is increased, yeah. The 120-second. The cooldown got reduced once again. But now that you have the Oracle's Lens last for 10 seconds, you can actually have the time to clear wards if you know where they are. Because Farsight Orb is assuming if you don't know where they are, or if there's a lot of wards and you have allies around you to help clear the wards. But if you're by yourself and you don't really know where the wards are, but you just want to sweep an area like Baron, then you could use Oracle's Lens, which is a great option. And then you can also place a stealth ward that lasts for 3 minutes, which is like basically Wriggles. Vision totem. Now instead of like the whole greater lens, you get a greater vision totem. So now you can place a vision ward down, which is pretty cool. So since you're only limited, I don't know if this counts as your limit of one vision ward, but being able to place a vision ward down at a location is going to be really, really helpful, especially on an area like Dragon or Baron where you can cover like a huge amount of space where potential wards could be. That'll be really helpful. So I think that's really, really cool that the upgrade gives you the power to place down a vision ward. You just have to be careful about where you place it, but I think that's a great idea. Like overall, I think the trinket idea is perfect. I think they definitely addressed the fact that other laners now like don't have an excuse of not warding since you have the ability to ward now, and it definitely relieves a burden of supports having to always like go D-ward pair them by themselves and like go run around the jungle and place wards everywhere. Because now instead of having supports do it, I mean of course they can still do it, but now like other lanes have the power to do it as well, so they can't keep telling the support to buy wards and stuff like that. So they definitely hit the issue very, very well, and I think I have to kind of test these changes, but so far it seems like it's a really good idea. I think the whole only fuzzy part is the whole idea of the scrying orb with the clairvoyance. I think that's kind of sketchy. I don't think it's that useful, but maybe it'll show some kind of use. Like maybe in really, really clutch situations you need vision on Baron or something. Like maybe that'll be helpful. We'll see. And now wards. So, like I was saying before, now the green wards is now renamed to stealth wards, and these are the only wards now that can be invisible. The green wards you can only have 3 placed per person, which is a really, really big change since now you can't just stack a lot of like sight wards late game. You like have to have your team buy wards for you, which is once again helping support to get more money to spend items and other things, which is good. And then ward tooltip displays how many stealth wards are currently placed, which is, I guess, good quality of life change. So what this means is that since these wards are the only wards that can be placed around a map, that means you can only have 15 site wards at a time, which is not a whole lot, especially considering that, like they're probably gonna get countered like every now and then and stuff like that. But it definitely limits map vision by a lot, and so like the game is definitely going to be a lot more about positioning and brushes, like ambushing people and stuff like that. It's not really so much of just like, oh, I have like millions of wards in my jungle, so just the jungler can't come at all, you know. So now it's definitely a lot more helpful to, I guess, increase a lot more action in the game as well, which is a good decision because the action's always fun. And then vision wards. So now vision wards are no longer stealth. Now this is huge. Like the problem with this, the biggest problem with the debate between wards and vision wards was the fact that late game there is actually like zero incentive to buy sight wards at all because vision wards did everything sight wards did but better because it gave true vision, which is super important when you're trying to counter wards. And I think they're definitely trying to take like I don't want to like talk about Dota that much, but like Dota like their interpretation of the vision wards and the sight wards is that I believe in the most recent patch of Dota 2, their version is that if you have like of their version of sight ward placed on the map, that just gives normal vision. It's invisible, right? Just like in League. And then their version of vision ward is that it doesn't give any form of normal vision and it only gives true vision, which I think is very interesting since you would only use those kind of words to counter invisible people and a counter ward and stuff like that. And just like with that kind of idea, you really only use vision wards if you want to counter a lot of sight wards because since they're no longer stealth, so the enemy team does have some counterplay in killing the vision ward since before. If your entire jungle is vision warded, there's really nothing you can do about it since like you have to counter that by buying your own vision wards or oracles, and then if you buy vision wards to counter it, then the winning team can just buy more vision wards on top of your poor vision wards spending. So it's just like a cycle of vision wards, which is exactly what you're describing over here. And so by kind of taking out that cycle and now making the vision wards visible and only at 5 HP, that definitely it really encourages like really good word placement, which I think is always very important since I think a lot of people don't really place words very effectively ever. And so by making sure you understand where to place your vision word, it's definitely going to really get rid of a lot of stall and a lot of and really kind of like abrupt like vision wars a lot since now like you can't just like camp like Baron and just eliminate all vision and just like kind of bait the enemy to come in. Like you have to like it's really hard to get rid of the enemy vision since it's so limited. And the only way you can really do that is if you use your trinket, which, you might not use your trinket for just eliminating vision, but that's kind of the trade-off you have to think about. So I think by making the vision ward limited, you have infinite duration also, which I think is also a really good point since the team that plays the vision ward now has to, maintain control of that one single ward, which is kind of funny, like imagining like 5 people huddling around the vision ward, just like protecting it with their life and stuff like that. But I think I think that's a very reasonable change. The cost got reduced to 75, which is cool, and there's only one per map. I'm not sure if it includes trinket once again, but this definitely, I think they definitely Riot definitely addressed the issue very well. That if you like try to take control of an objective like Baron or Dragon, it's a lot harder to do that since it's going to be very difficult to kill wards if you only have one vision ward available and like trinkets and stuff like that. And so it's definitely going to emphasize positioning a lot more, and I'm very excited to see like once I like test this out a little bit more, I'm very excited to see like how like people are going to adjust to that. I think people are really going to really start like people in non-supporting roles are really going to start to understand, you know, what's the best way to counter word? Where are the best word placements in certain locations? I think that'll be really cool. And Sightstone no longer have restricted by your southward cap, which I think that's kind of useless. And so, and once again, they removed oracles. So these ward changes are definitely very, very big, and I think Trinket is really awesome in conjunction with these ward changes. I think it's very I wouldn't say it's very balanced because I obviously have to test this myself, but I think this kind of I think they're definitely heading towards the right direction by including the trinket, which is surprising since like, like before like vision was so key before, and now vision is still key, but now it's even harder to maintain vision, and it really stresses that you really need to really understand when to use a trinket and when to place certain wards in certain locations at certain times, which is once again now a new thing for supports to learn because instead of just placing wards mindlessly everywhere, now you have to be very mindful about the three maximum site ward placements that you can have, and the one vision ward placement you can have. And so I think these changes for support are definitely going to make support in season 4 a lot more fun, without a doubt. Like hands down, I think everyone will agree that supporting season 4 is going to be a lot better. And I think I think maybe with these changes and with these gold income adjustments and with the whole like AP ratio and all that jazz, I think supports are definitely in a really good spot for season 4. I'm very excited because God, I can't stress how dumb supporting was in season 2 and season 1. It was so bad. Like, I don't want to get into those dark days, but now it's so much better, and I'm very excited to see what supporting is going to be like with all these new numbers and all these new items and everything. So hopefully this will be pretty cool. And I guess I might as well just talk about the other random items that supports could buy now, since like some of the items got fixed before. Like, okay, Banner of Command. Okay, Banner of Command is like, man, the numbers are super sweet. Like 80 AP on Banner of Command, 20% CDR. Like I could care less about the armor. I could care less about HP regen. Like having that much CDR is really really big, and especially with AP. So I think this is the fantastic item for most supports. If you just want CDR and you want AP, just get a Banner of Command. Like why would you ever need, a Morello Namicon, or why would you ever need a Athena Unholy Grail when you could just get the Banner of Command. And I think that's good that they're trying to get people to buy it and use it, but are the numbers too high? Maybe. Maybe on like the CDR aspect. I feel like 20% CDR for Banner Command is just so good to pass up on. I would actually probably get that item quite a bit. So that's really cool that they did that. They already kind of talked about Kage's. Oh, Mikhail's Crucible. It now only costs 1,600. That's a really big price change because Crucible was a really great item for situational picks. Because like let's say the enemy team has like a Fiddlesticks, Brady Carey doesn't have cleanse for some reason, then you can get a very early Crucible, so that way it even adds more kind of play to your support. Since I always thought like getting Crucible in supports is a really good item. It's also really fun since now you actually have more things to think about on who to use your Crucible on. And so by reducing the price by 900 gold, which is a lot, then supports can get a lot more early, and now supports can be even more impactful in team fights than before, which is really awesome. So that's great that we're reducing the price on that. Wrecker, the price is now 2,000 from 2,835. Doesn't have the whole HP and mana regen, which is fine. So I don't know if Wrecker is that worth getting, because I would probably still rather get Banner Command for that huge amount of CDR, but Wrecker might be a little bit more viable. Maybe not necessarily for supports, but it's definitely an option. And Shirley's Reverie, price once again got reduced. 20% CDR, which is once again an incredible amount of CDR. That's a lot of CDR for a Shirelia's. It generates mana. It also generates 2 gold per 10 seconds, which I think is really cool. So you can still make some money even if you make an early Shirelia's. Because one of the biggest pet peeves I've always had whenever I build a Philosopher's in a Shirelia right now is that I always want to hang on to my Philosopher's Stone as long as possible since I want to generate as much gold as I can from it. So I would delay my Shirelia's Reverie for literally as long as possible until I knew like we absolutely needed it for a team fight or something like that, then I would buy the Shirelias. Otherwise, I just hang on to them to the Philosopher's Stone. But now that they added like a little bit of gold per 10, it kind of like doesn't really it relieves the punishment of getting the Shirelias early, since normally if you get the Shirelia early, you miss out on the gold per 10. But now you still get gold per 10 even if you build it, so it's all good. It's really cool. And I guess you get a new passive, grant 4 gold each time a nearby minion dies that you didn't kill. So once again, increasing the effect of the philosophers like thingy, like call it didn't call it stone anymore. I forgot what it's called already. And yeah, Kage's upgraded the whole spell thief thing, and that's pretty much it. I guess there isn't really anything much to talk about. Twin Shadows, like who cares about Twin Shadows? Those are all the changes that they did for support, and I would say that most of these changes are for the better. I think that this is definitely the good direction for Riot to do. I just don't necessarily agree with the fact that you're assuming that supports are going to be building AP, which is not always going to be the case. Like I could see why they would do that since items like the like Ohm and Banner of Command, like they give out free AP and they give out like really good things that supports will probably get. But I say probably because once again, you don't always have to buy those items as support. You could still very well buy things like tankiness items like Sunfire Cape and like Iceborne Gauntlet and stuff like that that might not necessarily give you AP. So I don't agree with the fact that they're dumbing down all the like the AP ratios for spells because they assume that everyone will be buying AP on supports when it might not even be the most viable stat on supports anymore. So that's one problem I have. And it also they also don't really touch on the non-traditional supports because all the support changes they did were on the very, very traditional supports. Like when you think of support, you think of like Soraka, you think of Sona, you think of Janna, but they don't touch people like Annie or Fiddlesticks or like Elise or any other kind of non-traditional support. So if you put them in a bot lane, like their AP ratios didn't get touched at all, and they're gonna have more gold income, which will just make them even more monstrous than they already are. Like Annie is still really strong even without any AP, and if you give her the ability to just get so much more money and so much more AP, like that's like not she's not even supporting. She's literally like a semi carry. She's almost just as strong as she was if she was in mid lane, and so that's a really concerning problem that they only targeted the traditional supports and not the like pseudo traditional supports, but they can't really target that since that once again like that's one of the best things about League of Legends where you can play people in a lot of different rules that you're not usually used to seeing them. And so that's just one concern I have. I'm not sure what's the best way to fix it because obviously I'm not a game designer, but that's definitely something they should address because I would be very, very afraid Delaney gets an Annie in season 4 unless they kind of do some more changes and stuff like that. But once again, we'll see what happens over the next couple weeks or so once they start testing things, and hopefully maybe numbers will get changed and things will be a lot cooler. So hope you guys enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun just going over these changes. I'm very excited for season 4. I think once again, I think we should all just give just a round of applause to Riot for just coming up with all these really cool ideas that are trying to improve the game overall for next season and make it always more exciting, which I think is really good. So and feel free to just leave a comment about your opinion about this. Don't just listen to my opinion. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to think about these as well, because I always think maybe I missed a point somewhere in here. Maybe I'm completely wrong about something. And so I definitely want to just start trying to get some discussion on these things, because I think these are really important, very significant changes that are going to be happening. I think it's important for people to talk it out, to argue about it, to debate about it, because the more we do that, the, the better changes that will happen in the future. So definitely feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think about all these changes. And I'll see you guys